Way back in the spring of 1990, 10-year-old me was given a $5 allowance. In search of something to spend my money on, I came upon something fantastic at my local convenience store newsstand. It was then that I started a lifelong obsession with the gold standard of sequential art, the comic book. Now, as an old man, I have decided to open up some old boxes and dig into my comic book collection. I decided it's time for me to review and analyze the illustrations and artists that made me comics crazy. What's going on, folks? This is Chris Crazy House, and I'd like to welcome you all to an all-new episode of Chris Crazy House Presents Comics Crazy. And today we're going to focus on issue number 2 of the classic X-Men versus the Avengers. And this is another comic that I was gifted. This is not something that I bought off the shelf. I believe it came out in 1987, and it is illustrated by Marc Silvestri, a young Marc Silvestri. So we're going to take a look at this issue today. And when I say I was gifted this also came in that comic book bag that a friend of mine, his uncle, was giving away some old comics. So I took up those comics and they became part of my collection. And this is one of the ones that I thought had a very interesting cover. And over the years, I've read this book a lot, and I've looked through it both story-wise and illustration-wise. I have highly enjoyed it. It's actually one of my favorite comic books in my collection. But you can see that it has a lot of wear and tear on it as well. But I thought this was an interesting cover because it has Magneto front and center, holding his helmet and almost look like he's going mad, but you kind of see like his face is in shadow completely. And the title of it is The Temptation of Magneto. So he is the center point behind this whole conflict between the X-Men and the Avengers. This is part of a 4-part miniseries. I've actually only read the miniseries maybe one time. I think I might have a digital copy of it somewhere, but it's been so long since I've read it. I remember this book, though, very well because it was part of my comic book collection, and I've read it and reread it over the years. But we're going to take just a quick look at the cover before we get in on the story. And we see, like I said, Magneto holding his helmet, going crazy. You got Captain America and She-Hulk on one side, kind of looking at him like, what in the hell is going on? And Storm on the other side with Wolverine. Now, Storm looks like she's like, what is going on? Wolverine looks like he's ready to throw down and fight, which is funny to me. But I guess that's always the position that he's in. Like, he can't just be standing there looking surprised or aghast or whatever. He always has to be ready to do some damage. But we're going to peel this open and take a look at the story here. Once again, this is some of my favorite artwork in comics. I've always been a big fan of Marc Silvestri. I loved his work on Wolverine back during the 80s and early 90s, and his work on the X-Men. So getting to see him draw both the X-Men and the Avengers in this book was a real treat. So I'm going to open it here. And the first page just gives you a quick recap of what happened in the very first issue of the X-Men versus the Avengers. We get to see that Magneto's base, Asteroid M, has started to break up in the Earth's atmosphere, and pieces of it have been falling down to Earth. So at first, the Avengers stopped the pieces from falling down on cities and whatnot. But Magneto hears of this, and he wants to go find parts of his base. So at this point, Magneto has been helping out with the New Mutants. He's kind of tried to change his ways. That's where you get the different costume that he's wearing here. He wants to kind of change his ways and try to help out mutant kind and not be just so violent against humans. But, you know, people always see him as the villain, and the Avengers have come there to capture him as he tries to retrieve parts of his base of Asteroid M. But right as they show up, so do the X-Men. And right when they show up, so do the Soviet super soldiers. So Russia is very upset with Magneto because he sunk one of their nuclear subs back in anger back in the day. And he's always been labeled as a war criminal of Russia. And at any opportunity, they've been looking for a chance to catch up with him. And now they figure this is their opportunity now that the world is kind of worried about Magneto's asteroid causing so much damage. So that's where all these characters are meeting at this point. And we get right into the story with probably one of the greatest splash pages from the 80s. And this is one of my favorite splash pages of all time. It is a double splash page, once again done by Marc Silvestri. Joseph Rubinstein is doing the inking. And it's an all-out brawl between the Soviet super soldiers fighting the combined teams of the Avengers and the X-Men. And I enjoyed both. So I started out reading X-Men and the Avengers at this time. So for me, these were two teams. These are the two versions of those teams that I enjoyed. Okay, so because maybe just from nostalgia or what have you, but these are the Avengers teams and the X-Men teams that I grew up with, or how I started out when I read them, and how they look in both books. This is how I always see them. So I even like to go back to those times and like draw those characters in this way. So this is an amazing splash page though. Just look at the action going on here. You got the two armored individuals of the Soviet super team, the Crimson Dynamo and the Titanium Man, shooting their lasers at the characters. Captain America blocking one with his shield, and Wolverine kind of standing behind him with his claws. You got this girl called Dark Star who's shooting her Dark Force energy at the swordsman, at the Black Knight here, and he's blocking it with his sword Excalibur. Thor is blocking the hammer. You got Captain Marvel flying through the air. This is Monica Rambeau, Captain Marvel, which was my favorite Captain Marvel and probably the only one that should be there at this point. Just my opinion. We got Dr. Druid and Storm facing off against Ursa Major in the background. And we still got other background characters like Rogue, Magneto, Dazzler, and Havoc. So a well done page. Everyone's on this page. Everyone that's involved in this battle is on these two pages. And once again, extremely well done by Marc Silvestri. We get a great glance at all the characters, and this is not easy to do. In fact, it's probably very easy to get lazy with an illustration like this. I'm wondering if this was actually in the plot. I wonder if it was his decision or the editor's decision to have all the characters on one page like this, because this could have taken most of the time to do just this one illustration. But, you know, the rest of the issue may not have taken as long. I'm not exactly sure how fast Marc Silvestri is as an artist, but I'm sure this took a lot of time. Even though some of these characters are very small, it still looks like this was probably some work here. I can go on about these two pages all day, but I'm going to continue on with the story because there is some great action in here. And we got the Crimson Dynamo. His armor is acting up, and he's wondering what in the hell is going on. And what's happened is Captain Marvel has phased into his armor and caused it to short out. And while it shorted out, that's when Captain America takes the initiative and rams him with the shield. And we got Ursa Major here going to attack Dr. Druid and Storm. Storm moves out the way. She's actually wondering what is Ursa Major talking about, because Dr. Druid has gotten into both their heads to where she can't see him, but Ursa Major can. So when Ursa Major tries to jump down on him, he actually winds up just going through him because it was all an illusion. And he uses his magic powers to grab Ursa Major. So I was very familiar with Dr. Druid back then. He was kind of like the magic character on the Avengers at this time. So Doctor Strange was not on the Avengers back then, but they had Dr. Druid kind of working, doing the magic part for them. Classic ad, by the way, from the 80s of Spider-Man and Captain Crunch fighting the Soggies or the Sog Master to make sure that your cereal stays crunchy. Always enjoyed these ads from back then in the 80s. Getting on with the action, Rogue is trying to fly Magneto out of the way. And I always like this version of Rogue, the 80s punk version of her. And we got the Mohawk 80s punk version of Storm as well. And as they're getting out of the way, Dazzler kind of throws up some of her light magic, or not light magic, her light mutant powers to distract some of the other characters as the X-Men escape with Magneto. And we see Crimson Dynamo is upset. He's like, look, the X-Men escape with Magneto. And the Avengers just wanted to capture Magneto so that they can, have him be on trial. The Soviets want to take Magneto so that they can execute him. They're not playing with him at this point. The Avengers, at the very least, are trying to give him a fair trial. But Dazzler, she wants to block the Avengers from coming, even though the Avengers are some of her best friends. But she's using her powers to help other mutants because she knows, or she feels at the very least, that a mutant would never get a fair trial in any court. And so she's using her light powers to blind them. And I like the way that this is illustrated here with it drawn or colored in a very monochromatic way to where you can see how blinding the light that Dazzler is putting on both of them to the point where they can't see where the X-Men are going. And we continue on with the story here as Rogue is helping to fly Magneto out of the way. And as she's flying, Captain Marvel catches up to her with ease and basically tells her, like, you know what? After we deal with the Soviets, we are definitely going to deal with the X-Men at Magneto. So the X-Men need to choose whose side they really are on at this point. And then she's like basically just giving her fair warning. And without even having to do any type of clumsy turning, on a dime, she turns in the opposite direction. That's because this version of Captain Marvel is powered, or she is able to manipulate light, so she can travel at the speed of light. And she turned around very quickly and went back to the fight to help out her Avengers. And Rogue even realizes that if they have characters or they have people this powerful on the Avengers, the X-Men might be in big trouble. So we continue on with the battle. We got Thor fighting the Titanium Man. And this is Thor when he's looking more Viking-like at the time. He's got the beard. He's got armor on. And I think there was a point or something happened where Loki cursed him or something like that to where his bones became more frail. That's why Thor started wearing a little bit more Viking-type armor just to help protect himself. But we see him here fighting the Titanium Man, and all of a sudden the Titanium Man's armor stops working in the middle of their fight. And while that happens, that's when Thor comes in with Mjolnir and smashes him upside the head, knocking him unconscious. And it's revealed that Captain Marvel was the one that caused his armor to short out so that Thor could hit him upside the head. And Thor doesn't really feel good about that because he thought that it was something that he did that caused that armor to shut down, and he was able to take advantage of it. So he doesn't feel like the victory is all his at this point. Jumping in here, we got this. I forget what this character's name is. Let's see. Okay, it's Vanguard. So I was making sure I remember what his name was. But he also has a hammer that he uses to fight with. And he was fighting She-Hulk. But you can see she snatched the hammer from him and knocked him all the way across the field here. And he flies so hard and so fast, it almost knocks her off her feet. And we see him fly through a tree. So I enjoy seeing stuff like this where the characters are fighting so hard they almost even do damage to themselves. And once again, this was the Avengers I was used to. So I was used to the She-Hulk being the powerhouse member of the Avengers. So both with her and Thor, they were kind of like the muscle of the team at that time. And we see this character of Darkstar. She uses her Dark Force magic to shoot down on both the She-Hulk, and she captures the Black Knight as well. But they're asking, like, what are you doing, Darkstar? What are you doing? And she says, I know what I'm doing. I'm capturing you too. And it's revealed on the next page that she's actually wound up capturing her own comrades. And that's, once again, it's because of Dr. Druid. He's put the whammy on her to make her think that she was actually fighting the Avengers, when really she was fighting her own friends. And she's wound up capturing her own team for the Avengers. Getting back to the X-Men as they get back to their famous jet, the Blackbird, and they're getting ready to take off. And as they're trying to get away, they're helping Magneto get off his restraints. And Havoc is kind of upset about this, the fact that they actually had to come save Magneto just so he can go back and grab his old asteroid M. He's wondering, like, why are they wasting their time and their lives just to do that? And the other characters had to tell Havoc to calm down, because we all know at this point Havoc did not have complete control of his powers. That's why he's wearing this particular costume, because if he gets out of control, he could cause a whole lot of damage. Now, at the time, what Magneto is basically saying is he doesn't want any of the things that he created in Asteroid M to fall into the wrong hands. And Wolverine's asking him, he's like, really, are your hands really the best? Because when you were up there on Asteroid M, you were making it hell for both the X-Men and anyone else who stood in your way. And we can see a little brief flashback here of Magneto fighting Colossus and Wolverine. I like this little panel here, because we get to see that since Magneto does have control over every metal object, he's easily able to fight Colossus and turn Wolverine's adamantium against him. Now, Magneto claims those were the old days. I'm not like that anymore. And he has decided that he's going to go off by himself and reclaim the pieces of Asteroid M. So he flies off, and Wolverine is upset, saying, I knew it, we were wasting our time with this fool here. Back to the Avengers, they've captured all of the Soviet super soldiers with using Darkstar and her own powers against them. And as they're all held there, they said, Dr. Druid says, I'll keep her in a trance for about an hour, and that will hold them there. We need to go catch the X-Men and make sure we get a hold of Magneto. So this is when the Avengers go off. And once again, this is not easy to draw, drawing all these characters at once. The action went by kind of fast, but there was no cheats in any of it. We got to see full bodies and lots of action in this battle. And I appreciate the fact that Marc Silvestri took some time to do that. I'm not sure exactly how much time he had to do all this artwork, but I think he did an amazing job, because these are not easy characters to draw, especially all of them at once like this. So he did a great job as far as, like, you know, even drawing like mechanical characters like the Crimson Dynamo and the Titanium Man, and making sure all the correct details were in on the Avengers and the X-Men. So we follow up and we get back to Magneto, and he's raising Asteroid M from a nearby lake. So he's pulled part of it. I think this was like the nerve center, or like the main part of Asteroid M that has fallen down to Earth. And now he's pulling it out of the water. And we get some exposition here of the X-Men flying around in the Blackbird on their way to stop Magneto. And Wolverine is kind of upset, sitting there smoking a cigarette and saying, like, why are we even wasting our time going after Magneto? Is obviously he does not want our help. And, you know, Storm is just basically saying that, you know, at the end of the day, Magneto is still a mutant. So the X-Men are all about helping other mutants, no matter what they might be responsible for. And once again, they feel that he will not get a fair trial in any type of world court. So they want to do their best to keep him out of prison, and especially keep him away from the Soviets who want to execute him. Now, meanwhile, Captain Marvel is actually spying on them inside the Blackbird, but she's kind of phased out, so you can only see her frame here, and the X-Men can't actually sense where he is. So, or where she is, I should say. So they can see that she has she's used her light powers to just phase in as light energy, and no one can pick her up. Even Wolverine, with his senses, can't tell where she is. So she goes to report back to the other Avengers. And this is actually a really cool scene as well, where we get to see that Magneto is actually looking at his asteroid and kind of sitting there thinking about what type of person he has been over the years. He even comes across his old costume that he used when he was the leader of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. And he winds up actually taking his helmet back. So he puts the helmet back on, so you can kind of see that he's maybe backsliding a little bit. That's kind of like a visual cue to show that a little bit of the old Magneto is actually starting to come back, even though at this point he still wants to change his ways. He has to remember that who he was and to protect himself. At the end of the day, I think Magneto is a character that realizes that his self-preservation comes before anything else. And even to the point of taking responsibility for some of the wrong things that he did. But he still wants to get rid of Asteroid M. Right before he can do that, the Avengers show up. And we get a chance to, before anything even can get done, the Avengers go ahead and attack. And Magneto uses pieces of Asteroid M to fight back against the Avengers. And he's telling them that these fools are basically endangering themselves. And now what we find out earlier is that Magneto has actually set Asteroid M to self-destruct. So we got a very fun panel here of Magneto throwing pieces of Asteroid M at the Avengers, but them all using their individual powers or weapons to block those asteroid pieces from hitting them. And I like stuff like this. You know, the She-Hulk, she's punching it with her fist. The Black Knight, he's blocking it with his sword. Thor is spinning his hammer to block it. Of course, Captain America uses his shield. And Dr. Druid is using his magic. So both Thor and the She-Hulk jump in there trying to punch Magneto, but they can't get through his force field. But of course, Captain Marvel is able to phase in and change her body into light, and she's able to squeeze in through his force field and hit him with some of her own light energy, knocking him down. And right when they have Magneto captured, that's when the X-Men show up. So right off the bat, Rogue dives down and does a Goldberg spear on the She-Hulk. We see how they're tumbling here. And I've seen Marc Silvestri do illustrations like this before, where he has characters like tumbling from an action. He does that in some of his Wolverine books, and also later on when he worked on the X-Men, and then later on when he did Cyberforce. So this is something that I've noticed is kind of a signature of his, of characters. When they hit each other, they start tumbling out of the screen or off the page or something like that. This is another cool little panel here of the Blackbird sort of hovering in the air, and you got Havoc shooting off his powers at the Avengers, and Wolverine and Dazzler kind of jumping down. We get to see some of Havoc's powers almost take out Captain America and the Black Knight. And this is where we get one of my favorite panels from this book of the Black Knight facing off with Wolverine. And Wolverine uses his claws, the Black Knight uses his sword, Excalibur, and Wolverine's wondering, how in the hell are my claws not cutting through this sword? It should have easily cut through this sword, because my claws can cut through anything. And that's when the Black Knight says, like, yeah, but my sword is made out of magic and it was forged by Merlin. That's why your claws can't hurt it. And we get right back to the action here of Rogue fighting the She-Hulk. She knocks down She-Hulk as they're fighting down in the lake. But She-Hulk gets up and side kicks Rogue right to her stomach, knocking her off the screen. And once again, we got Captain Marvel getting into the scene here. She's actually more of a match for someone like Havoc, since his powers are based off of throwing energy. So she's able to fight him very easily. And we got the Dazzler. She's using her powers to kind of blind the Avengers again. And they're wondering, like, why, you used to be an ally of ours. Why are you helping out Magneto? And she's basically saying that, well, because he's a mutant. And you have to understand, when you're a mutant, we have to stick together. So she wants to make sure that he gets a fair trial and wants to protect him. So as Magneto wakes up after getting knocked out by Captain Marvel, he lets everyone know that, you know what, I set Asteroid M to explode. I set explosive charges. They're going to go off any second. And that's what causes everyone to actually stop fighting for a few minutes. And with seconds to spare, Captain Marvel reverts to her light form and she flies inside of the asteroid. But as soon as she gets there, right near the actual explosives, that's when it goes off. And this is a very well done explosion here for, even though that it's done in a small panel, it's still a very cool explosion. Like, even though she has light powers and she can move extremely fast, she still got there too late. Now, Magneto throws up a force field to protect everybody and, so they don't get hit by the blast or the debris. And even though he's hurting real bad, he's struggling and doing his best to make sure that everyone's not killed by that blast that he just set off. Now, he uses his powers to help the X-Men escape, and the Avengers have to kind of regroup. Captain Marvel helps to save Captain America, who flew into the water. And as the X-Men take off, they're hanging out back with Magneto, and I guess he's back helping them, or, staying within their protection. But unbeknownst to them, Dr. Druid has hitched a ride on the X-Men's Blackbird. And using his magic, none of them can detect him at this point. But he wants to see which way and what's going on with the X-Men and make sure that he can get the information back to the Avengers. So that's where the story ends. And there's more. Obviously, there's 2 more issues to this, but I don't own them. Not a hard copy anyway. I do believe I have a digital copy of it somewhere. But that was issue number 2 of the X-Men versus the Avengers. And once again, I've always enjoyed this comic book. It's one from my collection that was given to me as kind of like a gift, or just because someone was getting rid of their old collection. But I have enjoyed it over the years. I think the illustrations in this book are amazing. Marc Silvestri does an amazing job with the illustrations. I enjoy how he draws all the characters. I actually used this as a guide for when I was younger. I used this just to, basically to learn how to do figure drawing. So, like, even if you look at this page, this is a good example of good proportions when doing figure drawing. So he's got both males and females here, and also drapery. So if you want to learn how to draw capes or any type of drapery like that, you get a great example of it both on like Magneto, Dr. Druid, on Thor, on the Black Knight here. Just a great way of drawing drapery in a shorthand way for comic books. And I think that he did a great job in doing that. And also, you get mechanical characters. So I used this a lot when I was designing my own characters back then in the late 80s, early 90s as a child, just kind of being a budding artist. And I think that this book was a great example as far as doing classic comic book art and classic action sequences. So if you have it in your collection, it's definitely one to hold on to, and you can use it very well when designing your own action sequences for your own comics. So for those who enjoyed this, go ahead and like this video. For those who want more of Chris Crazy House Presents Comics Crazy, go ahead and subscribe to this channel. And for those who think that they know anyone else who will enjoy these classic comic books being reviewed and analyzed, go ahead and share this with them on their channel or in your email, or maybe just on social media. So anyway, folks, this is Chris Crazy House. We will be back with more Chris Crazy House Presents Comics Crazy. And I hope you enjoyed it. And let me know what you think of the X-Men versus the Avengers down in the comments section. Anyway, Chris Crazy House signing out. Peace.